Good evening, everybody. This is Strong Lead Hook and Griswold coming at you with something a little different for tonight. Griswold's got first Berserker Kazan pulled up on his end on his channel, and then I've got an AI video for you all tonight, and it is going to be evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. If you all saw my video regarding AI versus atheism, this is something similar where we get the AI Grok to present evidence and a case for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So as you can see here, we set up some ground rules. Actually, Grizz, you mind telling us what you got going on?
I'm just playing first Berserker because I'm pretty late into the game, but really I'm more interested in this AI conversation we're about to have. So I'm going to be doing more of a casual play in an area I'm already in, and just having fun with that, and just being involved in the conversation, that's for sure. And how's everybody doing tonight?
As you all know, when Griswold and I we hit you with the 1-2 wombo combo, don't forget to go to his channel and like and subscribe. On his video, on his end, it's going to be the gameplay footage of first Berserker Kazan, and then on my channel it'll be the screen recorded of me having doing the text with the AI. So my video can get a little dry because I've just got the AI pulled up and it's text based. So if that bores you, go to Griswold's channel, and then you can have something playing in the background instead of watching me type away.
Yeah, it should be fun that way, guys.
We've set up some ground rules for the AI. Grok is going to take the role of I will take the role of the skeptic. Grok will be the one to make a very strong case for the resurrection. There's no neutrality here. Right, I will attempt to poke holes in the AI's logic, and the AI will present its case regarding all the evidence available in the public domain, and especially in the King James Bible, regarding the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Alright, click enter. Alright, according to Grok, the resurrection of Jesus Christ is the cornerstone of the Christian faith, supported by historical, textual, and logical evidence. Here's the case. Oh, the AI, I've got it set up to where it gives very long, detailed responses. I will go over what I think is the most pertinent information. So that way, the videos, I'm not just sitting here reading something to you guys. That could get very dry. Unless you're watching our videos to fall asleep, in which case, that would be okay. Alright, number one, we've got the empty tomb. The Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John consistently report that Jesus' tomb was found empty on the third day after his crucifixion. This is corroborated by early Christian creeds like 1 Corinthians 15, 3-4, written approximately 5 to 10 years of Jesus' death. The empty tomb was undisputed even by Jesus' opponents, who claimed the body was stolen, indirectly affirming the tomb was empty. Okay, so even the critics of that time, since they couldn't disprove that the resurrection took place, they jumped to, well, the body was stolen, which then presents a whole nother set of problems. right? It's no different than what we hear people say today. Oh, well, it was, what people were arguing 2,000 years ago, the skeptics, they're saying the same thing today. So not much has changed after 2,000 years. All right. Then it says the post-mortem appearances. Multiple independent sources attest Jesus appeared alive after his death. Yep. There are multiple independent sources, credible ones, that can attest to Jesus appearing after his death. The Gospels record appearances to Mary Magdalene, the disciples, 500 people. These accounts are early detailed and varied, reducing the likelihood of fabrication. The transformation of skeptics like James, right? James was a skeptic when Jesus was alive in his ministry, but of course he becomes a brother of the body of Christ, within the body of Christ, after Jesus appears to him. And then of course there's Paul, the Apostle Paul, who was a persecutor of Christians, turned him into a believer, one of the pillars of the Christian faith. I'm going to do my best to be as biased on the skeptical side as possible, so that way, you get, I'm going to try to argue against the resurrection, so that way skeptics and atheists are getting a fair shot. You guys aren't thinking, well, he programmed the AI to argue for the resurrection. The disciples' transformation. The disciples shifted from fearful deserters to bold proclaimers of Jesus' resurrection. Peter is a good example of that. Willingly facing persecution and martyrdom. No one dies for a lie. Right? The Roman Empire, especially under Nero Caesar, persecuted and killed hundreds of thousands of people. Have you ever seen that in another religion? There is one religion, never mind. I'm not going to get into that. This drastic change suggests that they genuinely believe the witnessing of risen Jesus. Psychological theories like mass delusion fail to explain the consistency and persistence of their testimony across decades. Historical context. The resurrection claim emerged in Jerusalem, where Jesus was publicly executed. If the tomb wasn't empty or it was fabricated, opponents could have produced the body or discredited the claims, which did not happen. Instead, Christianity spread rapidly. Again, right? Like no one dies for a lie. How do you explain the rapid explosion of Christianity? The rate of its growth is unparalleled today. And it is still a dominant religion. The inclusion of women as primary witnesses, and that's another thing. You cannot say that Christianity is oppressive towards women, because women were treated as equals when it came to, they were treated as equals in Christianity. It's not like they were excluded from ministry or from serving the Lord. They were not excluded from that. Culturally less credible in first century Judea. Yep, so the fact that the early Christians in the first century were relying on the testimony of women as witnesses goes to show that Christianity is not an oppressive religion, because they believe the women, the accounts of the women. And by the way, that sort of oppression towards women, that did not come from Christianity. Okay, so the pagans were already doing it. Pagan Rome was already doing it. The before Christianity came on the scene. So you cannot say that that kind of behavior, that kind of bigoted, oppressive behavior towards women, you cannot say that came from Christianity. The fabricators would likely choose male witnesses for credibility, which we did not do. Christians did not do that in the first century. Alright, improbability of alternatives. Theories like the stolen body, swoon hypothesis, or hallucination fail under scrutiny. Roman crucifixion ensured death, with guards securing the tomb. Mass hallucinations don't ally with group experiences over time. Yeah, mass hallucination, that claim is about the weakest argument that you can come up with. We're not going to elaborate too much on that. I mean, we can all agree that that's a dumb take. Mass hallucination. Mass hysteria, sure, but for thousands of people to hallucinate at the same time, or let's say the 500 people to hallucinate at the same time, doesn't make any sense. It has no basis. The rapid spread of a fabricated story in a hostile environment, that's another thing too. Like the implications and the consequences of being a Christian in that time. You had enemies on two sides. You had the Jews, and then you had the Romans to contend with. But then you have all these people that are turning to Christ during that time. It doesn't make any sense for people to uphold a religion that they could not verify under the threat of death, with enemies on all fronts. The resurrection best explains the empty tomb, appearances, disciples, transformation, and the rise of Christianity. It is a historical event with evidential weight, not mere myth. I had to stop the video real quick. I'm sorry, because my battery is on low power mode, so the screen is gonna turn off. I am turning it back on. Alright, to continue, Grok says that he will respond to the skeptical challenges with forced rebuttals. Go ahead and poke holes. Okay. Let's see. What is the first? Grizz, you got anything?
I'm just kind of listening right here at the moment. Just yeah, I don't have nothing to share right at the moment. Just
for the first. Yeah, what we'll do is for the first part of this video, after the intro, we'll go over the historical evidence. So I'll tell the AI.
Yeah, back to the martyr thing. I would say that is true. Nobody would knowingly die for a lie. There are people that die for lies, but I think it's ignorance or unknowing, right? Like I think you're going to hit on some stuff, but there are people that die for lies. But they also, did they take the time to actually go learn what it is they believe in and compare it to what else is out there in the world? Like, I said it to you earlier, I think you should not be afraid to see what else is out there in the world and why it's wrong and why Christianity, I am biased. I don't care. Christianity is true.
So what I'm gonna say is there is not enough credible evidence. What historical evidence is available? And I'm gonna be snarky towards the AI, so that way it'll retort in a snarky manner. So that way he'll make the argument strong. What historical evidence is available that you keep spouting about? Historical evidence, even if available, it is not credible enough. Checkmate. And yeah, when I say no one dies for a lie, I more or less say that as a euphemism. I'm sure it has happened, but if we look at the numbers and the rate of growth, you would think that after the first 100 Christians that were publicly executed in brutal manner, that it would have stopped right there, right? That should have scared people straight, which it did not. Instead, more people got saved. More people came to Christ. The more Christians they killed, the more people became Christians as a result. You know, and some of these arguments, well, never mind. Let's keep going. Historical evidence. The resurrection is backed by credible historical evidence from early independent sources. First one is the New Testament documents. The Gospels, written 30 to 60 years after Jesus' death. The Pauline epistle, 5 to 20 years, are early by ancient standards. They report empty tomb, appearances, disciples' transformation. Then, of course, we've got the Gospel in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Non-Christian sources. Are there any non-Christian sources? Yes. We have the Jewish historian Josephus referencing Jesus' crucifixion and the disciples' claim of the resurrection. So Josephus is a respected Jewish historian. I don't find too many people out there that would contest the legitimacy and the credibility and the dating of Josephus's book, The Antiquities of the Jews. And you can't say that Josephus was biased, because he was a historian for the Roman Empire, right? He wrote The Antiquities of the Jews at the behest of the Roman government. Roman historian Tacitus confirms Jesus' execution under Pilate and the spread of Christianity. There's another Roman historian, Tacitus. He corroborates the resurrection and the execution, the death and the resurrection. Empty tomb. The empty tomb is attested in all four Gospels and implied by Jewish polemic of a stolen body. No counter evidence of a body being produced exists, despite the claim arising in Jerusalem where it could be easily disproved. So let's say that, okay, so if you're a skeptic of that time and this time, can you actually disprove that the resurrection happened, other than arguments, other than the basic questions that people have been asked, the skeptics have been saying for 2,000 years, right? Well, where is he now, you know, or the body was stolen. As always, a lot of the skeptics, not the atheists, they cannot provide counter evidence. The disciples' behavior, the rapid shift of Jesus' followers from despair to bold proclamation facing death is documented in Acts and early Christian writings. This suggests they encountered something extraordinary like the risen Jesus. These sources are as reliable as any for ancient history. Tacitus on Nero, multiple early independent accounts, including hostile witnesses, outweigh skepticism. The the lack of contemporary refutation, and Christianity's growth in a hostile environment bolster credibility. Those are the two main ones. How do you explain the growth of a religion where joining that religion is so dangerous, and there's more danger to your life and to the life of your family if you jumped into this religion? So, but not only did a couple people join the religion, but you had it practically converted an entire nation, the Roman Republic, the Roman Empire, to where later they had no choice but to make it the state religion. That's a whole nother topic of discussion, but you know, the Roman government didn't have any other choice but to say, well, we have to use this as a state religion, or else we lose control of the masses. So let's see, he went to the disciples' behavior, empty tomb, non-Christian sources. We'll go over the biblical stuff towards the end of the video and some of the rebuttals. We'll go into that more in detail. But for right now, I want to go over more non-Christian sources like historical and archaeological evidence. So let's ask him. Yes, but there is not enough historical or archaeological evidence. My rebuttal is there's not enough historical or archaeological evidence. What other non-Christian sources can you provide as evidence? So some of the stuff, the AI is just going to repeat it. So I'll give it a quick read, but I'm not going to go into too much detail, especially if we've already addressed it. All right. Besides Josephus, you have Suetonius. In the Lives of the Caesars, he mentions that the Jews expelled from Rome due to their disputes over Christus, referring to Jesus, indicating early Christian activity tied to the resurrection claims. You had the movement of Christianity that is addressed by a non-Christian historian. Then you had Pliny the Younger. In letters, he describes Christians worshiping Jesus as God, reflecting the rapid spread of belief in the divinity of Jesus Christ, consistent with claims of the resurrection. Then he brings up Marabar Serapion. In a letter, he refers to the execution of the Jews' wise king, whose teachings persisted, aligning with Jesus' death and the endurance of his followers' claims. So this Marabar Serapion, he could be referring to anybody, right? But if we take it at face value, this was dated at 73 AD, and he's saying those teachings persisted. But you can say, well, Marabar was talking about the other people that claimed to be Messiah around that time, around the 1st century AD. But you can't, the problem with that is those false messiahs, they didn't teach anything. They were militaristic leaders. There was one guy claiming to be the Messiah around that time. His name was like Judas or something. And these people were on the side of military leaders because they would stage rebellions against the Roman Empire. And all of this culminated in 70 AD, in the destruction of the temple. Archaeological corroboration. While no direct artifact proves the resurrection, archaeological findings like the Pilate's stone, talking about Pontius Pilate, and Caiaphas's ossuary, validate the Gospel's historical setting. The Shroud of Turin, you've also got that, although it's debated, aligns with the details of the crucifixion. Okay, so he brings up the Pilate's stone and Caiaphas's ossuary. So let's ask him, what is the Pilate stone and Caiaphas? Let's ask him what these things are. What is the Pilate's stone and Caiaphas' ossuary? How are they relevant? And all you have are two archaeological sources. Not enough. Try again. So I asked the AI, what is the Pontius Pilate stone and the ossuary of Caiaphas? And other archaeological sources. So the Pilate stone is a limestone slab discovered in 1961 at Caesarea Maritima, inscribed with Pontius Pilate's name and title as the prefect of Judea. It confirms the historical evidence of Pilate, a key figure in Jesus' trial and crucifixion as reported in the Gospels. Then we've got the ossuary of Caiaphas, a limestone bone box found in 1990 near Jerusalem inscribed with Joseph, son of Caiaphas. It likely belonged to the high priest Caiaphas, who presided over Jesus' trial. Caiaphas was the high priest that he was the one that had Jesus arrested and crucified. He was like the ringleader of the people, the Pharisees, that, pushed for Jesus' crucifixion. And he was the guy that persuaded Pilate to put guards outside the tomb. This is the main ringleader of skeptics in that time. We don't see him past a certain point in Acts because it was too late to stop the Christian train at that point. The Christian train is running full steam ahead. So with the Pilate stone, you could say, well, that could be anybody. That could be any Pilate. But it's dated around 26 to 36 AD. If you look at Roman records, how many Pontius Pilates were given office as governor of Israel during that time? There was only one. Especially around that time. And if you say, well, the date is wrong, archaeological evidence dating is wrong. So if you say that, well then all the other archaeological evidences that we've been compiling over the years, we also have to question them, because you can't say, well, these archaeological items, we can take the dates and run with it, and then turn around and say, archaeological evidence relating to Christianity is invalid for whatever reason. And Caiaphas, again, you can say, but that could be any Caiaphas. And with that, I go back to the dating. Not only that, but where, from what I understand, where Caiaphas was buried, this is where the Pharisees would have been buried. This is where he wasn't a common guy, right? Caiaphas wasn't just like some common peasant. He would have been buried somewhere where the higher status people would have been buried. And then once again, you have to do a census. You have to disprove that too. You have to do a census and say, well, how many Caiaphas that were high priest, the son of Joseph, existed in that time. Alright, relevance. These artifacts corroborate the historical setting of the Gospels. Ultimately, they don't prove the resurrection, but they support the reliability. And that's true, right? This is not the evidence that we look to prove the resurrection. We have other better evidence, but I just wanted to see what if there was any archaeological evidence that supported it. Additional archaeological evidence: the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This one is identified at Jesus' burial site since the 4th century. Archaeological studies suggest it aligns with a 1st century tomb outside Jerusalem's walls. This one is a bit shaky. I'm not going to go into detail with the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It's hard too obscure as archaeological evidence to prove it, in my opinion. Synagogue inscriptions. Early Christian references in Palestinian synagogues, the Capernaum, indicate rapid spread of Jesus' movement, implying a significant event like the resurrection. Okay, so there's three here: the Holy Sepulchre, the synagogue inscriptions, and crucifixion evidence. They are not particularly strong evidence. Right, they're not particularly strong. But once again, these are not the end-all be-all. This is not what the Christians look to as evidence. Crucifixion evidence. The discovery in 1968 of a crucified man's heel bone in Jerusalem confirms Roman crucifixion practices, matching the gospel descriptions of Jesus' death. As far as archaeological and non-Christian historical sources, I'll stop right there so we can get to the rest of our video. But before we proceed any further, Griswold, you got anything you'd like to add?
I was listening. I think me and you were talking about it at the beginning of this. What is proof, right, as man sees it? And yeah, if we can say Hitler exists, if Caesar exists, all these things that we take as factual, then you have to say Jesus exists, and the writings that were written about Jesus and what he did, and the people that spoke in the name of Jesus. Well, at the very least, this man existed and did what you heard that he did, because it's been very well documented, more so than anybody else in our history. And what I mean by that is, like, if you looked at Hitler, you could probably look at his whole life and say, oh, this is him here, here, and here. Well,
right.
That's what they did with Jesus. So if you're going to sit here and say Hitler is this and this and this, then you got to look back at that same kind of evidence and say, well, Jesus is whom we think, and not think, whom we know he is.
If we use the metric that the skeptics use as proof or non-proof, right? Like if we use their metrics, then yes, we can prove the resurrection. But if they refute it they really can't, because we're using their metric. We're using their measuring bar. I mean, we don't do that. right? Our faith is the evidence. But if we're using their standard as proof or to disprove, well, then they can't turn around and say, ah, well, that's not enough, that's not enough. Especially with archaeology and carbon dating.
And for me, at the end of the day, we're standing here. That means...
Yeah. Yeah.
That's where...
The next thing we're...
The numbers... that show for us to be able to be alive standing here today is beyond impossible with everything in the universe. So, I mean, we're here to look at something else, but...
Yeah, and that's what I was talking about in my last video with AI versus atheism, is the statistical probability that Earth would be congruent with life, and that gravity would be so precisely engineered, because one little change in gravity and the universe will not support life, and it's consistent all throughout the universe. So that has to be the byproduct of a sentient mind. It can't just be by accident. Alright, we're gonna move on to what does the Bible say? But the AI is asking what quantity or type of evidence would satisfy you. Okay, so let's go over. So with the rest of the video, in order for me to get the information out, I'm gonna have to take a back seat in like the skeptical role, because there's gonna be important details that we miss. So now let's ask him, what does the Bible say? Towards the end of the video, we'll bring up the common questions of the skeptics. I'll bring that up again. What does the Bible say? Alright, of course we are going to the New Testament, the 4 Gospels and Paul's epistles, providing the biblical claims about Jesus' resurrection. Okay, so of course the 4 Gospels, they all describe the empty tomb. Jesus' tomb was found empty on the 3rd day, especially with the women followers. Right? It was common practice in that time to hold the word of women lesser than the word of men. That's not a Christian thing. People have been doing that before Christianity. Pagan Rome, they viewed women's word as lesser. And yet, you have all these women, female Christians, that were not afraid and were not dismayed nor discouraged from giving their testimony, from giving their account. What do they have to gain by doing that, right? They're putting themselves in danger by doing that. Not to mention the fact that people will probably not believe them. The chances that that'll happen is low. The chances that people will actually believe them. They have nothing to gain by continuing to provide their account, their testimony, right? Post-mortem appearances according to the Bible. Jesus appeared alive multiple times to Mary Magdalene, to the other women, the 2 disciples on Emmaus Road, to the apostles, including Thomas, and to over 500 people at once, and then later we have James and Paul. The transformation of the disciples, that's something we've already gone over. Theological significance, the creeds of the Christians, especially the gospel, 1 Corinthians 15, 1 through 4. So with these two, we've already touched on that. So we're just gonna move on past that. So now what I'm gonna ask the AI is, what are the prophecies concerning Jesus Christ in the Old Testament? Before I ask the AI this question, it is impossible with the prophecies that the AI is going to bring up regarding Jesus in the Old Testament to fulfill just 8 of those prophecies. The statistical probability, there's no need for me to say the number because it is statistically impossible for all of them to happen. There's over 300 prophecies in the Old Testament. Just for Jesus to do 8 of them, the probability that he could do that is low. And I'm not talking about the miracles. I'm not talking about the miracles. I'm just talking about the basic stuff. How is it that he's from the line of David, legally from his father's side, biologically from his mother's side, that would be born in Bethlehem on the day that on this year that the Daniel told you when he would be born, and then for him to live in Galilee as a carpenter and to die at the age of 33 years old? How can one man do that? He crossed the gates in Jerusalem on the day that Daniel said it would happen. Just pick 2 of them. How can he, on a donkey, go through the gates of Jerusalem on the day that Daniel said it would happen, and then the same man that can do that would be born from the line of David, which is verifiable, and for him to be the legal son of David from the Davidic line, dying on the day in the same year that Daniel told you he would die, right? That sound about right, Griswold?
Yeah, absolutely.
You think I'm missing anything with that?
No, you're pretty well on point. You've known your stuff for quite a while. No, it sounds right there where it's
and the fact that his side, the fact that his side would be pierced by a spear, the fact that his clothes were torn up and the Roman guards drew lots for them, the fact that if you take any one of those things in isolation, yes, you could pull them off. In isolation, yes, you could pull them off. But you take all those things, you put them together. Now you've got a problem. Now the burden of proof is on you. How can one man do all these things? And we're just referring to his resurrection. We're not talking about all the other statements regarding Jesus. We're not talking about his life, the miracles that he performed. We're not even addressing any of that yet. I don't even know if we'll have time to address it tonight. Anyways, let's continue. Old Testament prophecies concerning Jesus Christ, the birth of the Messiah. All right, so in the Old Testament, King James, Greek Septuagint, Hebrew Masoretic, all of these prophecies you could find in there. So even though AI is laying it out, you could go to any one of those 3 texts, the KJV, Greek Septuagint, or the Hebrew Masoretic. You could find these in there. The first one, like I said, a ruler from Bethlehem. Oh, and by the way, if you go, there's this astronomy app. It's called Stellarium. It's the prediction of the... It's the movement of the stars and planets that's been recorded. And also, what am I trying to say? They broke down the math, and they know that this star would be here in this constellation, and the planet, this Saturn, would be over here in whatever year or month. I know that doesn't sound very intelligent the way I'm describing it, but just go check it out. Stellarium. It has all the movements of the planets, and it dates all the way as far as back as you can go. So if you go to Stellarium, if you are all aware with the story of that, the Star of Bethlehem, you could find that Star of Bethlehem in Stellarium. You go subtract 2,000 years from today, and you start working your way down. You can not 2,000 years, but 2,033 years. 2,030 something years, you can start looking for it. You'll find it there. So you can find out from Stellarium the year that Jesus was born. It might not be exact though. You know, you don't take that as your final authority. It's just, you can go look for yourself. A virgin will bear a son named Emmanuel, linked to Jesus' virgin birth. I'm gonna drop the whole skeptic act because it's just hard for me to poke holes into these things. Knowing what I know now, it's hard to role play as a skeptic.
Yeah, that was my point.
It's not because I'm biased. It's not really because I'm biased. It's because if you're thinking about it logically, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, you used to be a Catholic. Something made you...
I didn't know. Right. I didn't know what I knew back then. I had no idea.
You knew you believed in something, you didn't really know why. Does that sound about right?
No, basically I did it because my family did it, but I didn't believe.
You grew up in something, and at some point you started to question it. When you started to question it, it's like, is this real or isn't it real, right? And when the evidence starts to show you that that's not real, that's not to hate on anybody out there. That's not to hate on anybody. It's really not.
Well, the reason why I fell into atheism, it boils down to me not doing my homework and believing what I want to believe.
I meant more of like where you were a Catholic and then you fell away from that and became an atheist, right? Like you grew up in Catholicism, you were taught something, you were shown something, and then you started to question it. And when you questioned it, it didn't lead you back to it. When you go to the Bible and you question the Bible and you question everything about the Bible, right? The KJV, because that's the Bible, people, just so you know. It will lead you back to the Bible. It's okay to question it. It is. It's okay to question God. It is. He's going to lead you right back to him. If you're being true to what's there, it's going to lead you back to him.
Yeah, if you're diligent, if you're being honest, I was not being honest and I was not being diligent. That's how I became an atheist, is because I didn't put in the time to do my research. And I wanted to believe what I wanted to believe. I did not want to believe that there was a God. And if you're an atheist, you're a skeptic, and you take offense to that, you should, because you know as well as I do that it's not a lack of evidence that is the problem. You are choosing what you want to believe because for whatever reason. And on the other side of the spectrum, I'm not saying that us Christians are not choosing to believe what we want to believe too. We did make a choice. You made a choice, we made a choice, The line on the sand has been drawn.
You got all these scientists who are like, what is it for? That's the mystery. Why are we here? Yeah. The Bible's already laid it out for you. The Bible has said, you're here to give grace. You're here to give your faith to the Lord so he can save you. That's what you're here for. That way, after this life, you can move on to something very special.
And And I hate that the lack of evidence is brought up in the scientific community, because that is just dishonest.
It is.
There is enough evidence.
You talk about it all the time. Science was originally used to prove the Bible, not to go against it. And it's just like,
you look at the scientific revolution and then the Renaissance, the majority of the physicists, scientists, and astronomers of that time, you've got Galileo, what's the other guy's name? Tesla? I don't know if it was Tesla.
I'm not too sure on who did what made her famous.
I know that Leonardo da Vinci, he was a Christian.
Was he? I didn't know that.
Yeah, man. What's the other guy's name? Anyways, y'all get what we're saying. The Messiah's role, Isaiah, a child born as a wonderful counselor, mighty God, reigning on David's throne, applied to Jesus' divine kingship. Isaiah 61, anointed to preach good news, heal, and liberate, fulfilled in Jesus' ministry. Okay, so if we take the miracles that was laid out when Jesus was healing people in the Synoptic Gospels, if we take that at face value, then you can take that as evidence that prophecy is fulfilled in the Old Testament, that God will come down and heal people, literally. Now here's our most commonly used one, the suffering and the death. Psalm 22, pierced at the hands and at the feet, garments divided, fulfilled in Jesus' crucifixion. So once again, we can take these on their own, isolate them, and say, well, anybody could do that. The criminals were pierced in their hands and their feet. But now you have to ask, were their garments divided by the Roman guards? You start adding all these pieces together, you start putting them together, and then you'll find that just to do 5 of them is astronomically impossible. Out of the 300 statements said about Jesus Christ, you close your eyes, right? You pick out 5 of them, you put them together, and then you start to calculate the statistical probability that they would occur, that they would happen. On the time that the Bible said that it would happen. Isaiah 53, suffering servant, rejected, bearing sins, killed, buried with the rich, fulfilled in Jesus' passion and burial. That's another thing too. Jesus was a carpenter. He came up in a poor family. And a person like that started the biggest religion on planet Earth. Unseen in the last 2,000, in the entirety of human history, something like that has not been seen. A religion that was started by a common man, a poor carpenter. So you start taking all these things and you start putting them together. Then you calculate the statistical odds that can happen. Zechariah, he was pierced on the side. Once again, you have to take that into account. Calculate the odds that will happen. The piercing of the side in the crucifixion, that was not common practice. That was not common practice. So it's not business as usual. When they pierced his side, it wasn't done to the other prisoners, the other criminals. It's not common practice. They had to, the reason why they did it was because the Sabbath was the next day. And sundown was coming, so they had to get it done and over with. They couldn't just leave him there, right? Because of the Sabbath. Resurrection, Psalm 16:10. God's Holy One, not abandoned to the grave, applies to Jesus' resurrection. That's making a reference to the resurrection. And then you've got Isaiah, the servant's life prolonged after suffering, which is talking about the resurrection. Messianic reign, Daniel 7, the Son of Man given eternal dominion, fulfilled and Jesus' exalted status. These prophecies, written centuries before Jesus, align with New Testament accounts of his life, death, and resurrection, suggesting divine foreknowledge. Skeptics may argue ambiguity or reinterpretation, but the specificity and the number of fulfillments strengthen the case. Okay, so we've got that. And this is not comprehensive. This is not everything. These are just briefly touching on the absolute bare minimum. Because if we did every single statement, we'd be here for hours. We'd be here for hours. Because there's too much.
Well, too much.
So now let's... Yeah, like if we took every single statement in the Old Testament regarding Jesus, you know, his life, death, and resurrection, it's too much. There's a lot.
That's disappointing.
There's a lot of statements said about him that he actually did. Now, if you're listening to this, don't be an idiot and say, "Oh, he didn't come back. He didn't come down on a horse and subdue the world." Okay.
All the time. Very annoying.
Obviously, that's later.
You, when he already had me.
Daniel, here's what I'm gonna say. Daniel is not credible. The book of Daniel
Thank you
is
for the strength you've given
post-dated,
Master Osman. Now Kizan will die.
and Daniel's description of Jesus is not accurate. So I'm just throwing out generic arguments. I could do a better job of poking holes in this, but I just want to touch on the more very important things, which is the post-dating and the non-accuracy of the statements said about Jesus. Alright, here's the important one. The book of Daniel is dated to 6th century BC is debated. Skeptics argue for 2nd century composition due to its accurate predictions of Hellenistic events, right? About in Daniel, there are descriptions of the Greeks taking over Israel, and also descriptions about Alexander the Great and the fact that his empire was divided into four. One of them is Ptolemy, Seleucus was the other one. I cannot remember the other two. But the reason why people try to post-date Daniel is because of how accurate it is. And the latest they can date Daniel is 2nd century BC, which is still before Jesus. Right, but the traditional dating of the book of Daniel is 6th century BC. Why is the book of Daniel important? Well, the book of Daniel predicted with pinpoint accuracy the day that Jesus would ride on a donkey to Jerusalem, on the day that Daniel said it would happen. So now you take, I don't want to go, I don't mean to keep going on about this point, but you take the exact day that Messiah went to Jerusalem on a donkey. The same guy is born in Bethlehem and grew up in Galilee and was a carpenter and was born through the line of David. I mean, I could go on and on. In isolation, you can probably pull him off, right? You can't. Ocean's 11, at least 5 of the Old Testament prophecies where you set up a heist, you can do that for just one. You can say that the apostles did some Ocean's 11 stuff, but even if they did that, that would only apply to a couple of the statements said about Jesus. And oh, by the way, the apostles were too uneducated. They were uneducated hillbillies. They could not have conceived of doing something like that. They could not have done that. And what would they have gained, by the way? You know, the disciples and the apostles and the people converting to Christianity at that time, what did they have to gain? Other religions have something to gain. I said what I said.
The great
They do.
What did he ever